At my sister's baby shower, my parents stood up and said, I wasn't theirs. But what they didn't know was, I already knew. And it wasn't just the words that cut. It was the way they said it. Calm, practiced, like they were reciting lines in a speech they'd been dying to deliver. My name's Mara. I'm the one they don't talk about unless they need something. The afterthought. The girl in the corner who doesn't quite fit the family mold. I wasn't even invited to the baby shower, not really. My name didn't show up on the seating chart. It wasn't on the group text about the theme. Not even a tag on one of those little welcome bags filled with tea and trinkets. I found out because my cousin Tara casually mentioned the time during a phone call. Thought I'd already RSVP'd. When I told her I hadn't been invited, she froze like I'd just told her I'd grown a second head. I'm sure it was just a mistake, she mumbled, but we both knew it wasn't. Still, I showed up. I always do, even when I know I shouldn't, even when I know it'll hurt. The backyard was picture perfect. Soft music, floral arches, pastel balloon garlands. Everything was curated to the point of suffocation. Vienna, my sister, had always been the star, and this day was no different. I helped carry in the cake. 3 tiers, blush pink, flecked with edible gold. My fingers were still sticky with frosting when my mother leaned in and said, "Try not to make things about you today, Mara." And just like that, I knew she already had. No one thanked me for the cake. No one even looked at me. Except Tara, whose smile twitched like she didn't know whether to laugh or apologize. I walked toward the refreshment table, pretending to refill a glass of cucumber water I wasn't going to drink. The air smelled like sugar and roses and something fake. Underneath it all, like a perfume trying too hard. Vienna spotted me from across the yard. Her smile never faltered, but her eyes swept past me like I wasn't there. Like I was a light fixture or an umbrella stand. I stood quietly by the mimosa bar, trying to disappear, when Maddie, one of Vienna's old friends, walked up behind me and whispered, "You should just enjoy it quietly. This really isn't your moment." She smiled like she was doing me a favor by not saying it louder. I nodded, smiled back. "Of course," I said. I forgot. Vienna's life is everyone's moment. I moved to the back of the garden and sat alone at a table half hidden by a wreath. No one followed. No one noticed. They started opening gifts. I watched from a distance. My gift, a handmade baby blanket I'd spent 2 weekends crocheting, was quietly opened, barely glanced at. Vienna didn't read the tag, didn't say my name. An older woman sitting next to me leaned over and asked, "Is that your daughter up there? The tall one in green?" I shook my head. "No, that's my sister." She blinked. "Oh, I just assumed. You look so—" She didn't finish. I didn't ask her to. Eventually, I slipped away. After the cake was served, I left through the side gate without saying goodbye. My phone buzzed as I crossed the parking lot. A text from Vera. Not, "Did you get home okay?" Not, "Thank you for coming." Just, "Thanks for not making a scene." Sat in my car, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My makeup still looked perfect, but I didn't recognize the face staring back. That night, I poured a glass of wine and stared at the invitation I'd pulled from Vienna's trash weeks earlier. It was still sealed, addressed to the Bellamy family. No mention of me. I wasn't a Bellamy by blood. I'd known that since I was 6. But this party, this was the moment they told the world I didn't belong. The air had shifted that day. Just slightly. Not like a thunderstorm. No. More like the pressure behind your eyes right before you cry when everything is too quiet. And then, right on cue, a glass clinked. My father stood in the center of the garden holding a champagne, flute like he was about to make a toast at a wedding. "We just want to thank everyone for being here," he said. "Vienna's little girl is going to grow up surrounded by so much love." My mother joined him, one hand over her heart like she was reciting a pledge. Her voice was soft, sweet. "When Mara came into our lives at age 2, she said, we knew we were being given a chance to love someone who needed it. And just like that, the secret was out. But it wasn't the secret that broke me. It was the way they chose to unveil it. Like a proud charity announcement, like I was a project, like I was never really theirs to begin with. I didn't say goodbye when I left. No one noticed me slip out the side gate, and I didn't wait around to be thanked. I just walked. Past the tulip centerpieces, past the picture-perfect smiles, and into the quiet that sat just beyond the hedges. My phone buzzed as I crossed the driveway. One text from Vera. "Thanks for not making a scene." That was it. No, "Glad you came." No, "Did you make it home safe?" Just that same gentle command I'd heard my entire life. Don't make this harder for everyone else. When I got home, I dropped my purse on the kitchen table and went straight to the bathroom. I stood in front of the mirror for a long time. My makeup was still flawless. My lipstick hadn't smudged. My curls were in place. And yet, I looked like someone who didn't belong anywhere. I peeled off my heels and poured myself a glass of wine. My feet ached, but not as much as my chest. I sank into the couch and stared out the window, watching the shadows stretch long across the floor. And then, without really thinking, I got up, walked to the drawer near the entryway, and pulled out the thing I wasn't supposed to have. A baby shower invitation. I'd found it weeks ago in Vienna's trash, still sealed. I'd stopped by her place late one night to drop off candles for the party, extra favors she'd asked for without saying thank you. And there it was, sitting on top of a stack of paper towels and coffee grounds. I remember staring at the envelope for a long time, wondering if it had been a mistake. Maybe an extra copy. Maybe one meant for someone else. But then I saw it. The label. To the Bellamy family. Not to me. Not even to Mara. Just the family. The name they gave themselves. That's when the knot in my chest started to tighten in a way I couldn't ignore. It wasn't the first time I'd felt it either. I remember my 8th birthday. Vienna got a bike with glitter streamers and a basket. I got socks. White ones with my initials stitched in a font that didn't match anything I owned. Vera told me they were a custom order and that I should be grateful someone thought of me at all. I remember nodding, smiling, pretending it didn't hurt, because even back then I knew the rule: don't cry. Crying meant weakness, and weakness got punished. Another time I was maybe 10, organizing my school binder at the kitchen table. I found this old drawing tucked behind some loose papers. It was crayon on construction paper, stick figures, bright colors, crooked hearts. A little girl standing next to a woman with curly brown hair and kind eyes. I had written in big, clumsy letters, "My real mom." I was so proud of it. I don't even know why. I showed it to Charles, my father. He stared at it for a long time. Then he took it out of my hands and said, "You don't need to imagine what doesn't matter." I never saw it again. But I remembered. I remembered all of it. The silences. The missed calls. The gifts forgotten. The way the family group chats dried up around me, like I was a ghost. And that party, Vienna's baby shower, was just the final stamp on something they'd been saying for years without using words. You don't belong. You're not one of us. They'd spent decades insisting I was part of the family, that I was loved, that I mattered. But the way they said it, the way they performed it, it was all for show. The invitation, the speech, the way no one looked at me after, it wasn't an accident. It was confirmation. And maybe I should have crumbled under that. Maybe I was supposed to. But instead, something in me settled. Not in defeat, but in certainty. If they weren't going to tell me the truth, I was going to find it myself. Because I knew, deep down, there was more to this story than what they'd let slip under the floral archways and gold balloons, and I was done waiting for them to explain it. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept waking up with this dull pressure in my chest, like my body was bracing for something it couldn't name yet. Around 4 a.m., I gave up trying. I pulled on a sweatshirt, tied my hair back, and went to the attic. I hadn't been up there. In years, not since they turned my old bedroom into a guest suite for Vienna's college friends. The air was thick with dust and that strange stale smell of things people forget on purpose. Boxes were stacked high, most of them labeled in Vera's handwriting. Vienna's school awards, Vienna's baby shoes, Vienna's first haircut. My name wasn't on anything. Eventually, I found 2 old plastic bins shoved in the far corner, lids cracked, no labels. I pulled the first one forward and opened it. Inside were a few faded t-shirts, a chipped snow globe, and a kindergarten art folder with a bent spine. I flipped through it slowly, half expecting another destroyed drawing to fall out. But what I found was worse. Tucked behind a finger-painted treehouse was a folded birth certificate. My breath caught Marilyn Wells. Mother: Lana Wells. No father listed. I read it twice before I even noticed the second page clipped behind it. Some kind of legal form. A court-issued placement document. Something about non-parental custody. The signature line was blank, just a few stamped initials and a date from over 2 decades ago. I sat down on the attic floor, the cold of the wood seeping through my jeans, and tried to make sense of what I was holding. They knew. They had always known. The lies weren't accidental. They weren't mistakes or misunderstandings or just things left unsaid. They were decisions. I thought about the way Vera had handed me a packed duffel bag on my 18th birthday and said, "You're old enough to make your own way now." No hug, no ceremony, just a ride to a bus stop and a list of hostels. At the time, I told myself that was normal, that they were teaching me to be independent, but now I could see it for what it was. They weren't making space for me to grow. They were clearing the house of what didn't belong. I started searching. Anything with the name Lana Wells. I dug through dusty records, old emails, newspaper archives, every dark corner of the internet I could reach without tripping an alarm. Most of what I found was vague. One blurry article from the 90s, local psychiatrist placed on leave following ethics complaint. No photo. No real details. Another link referenced a closed facility, Silver Birch Wellness Institute, shut down in the early 2000s, internal restructuring, sanitized words. But I kept going. Eventually, I landed on a lead, an address tucked into a barely functioning website for a long-term care facility hidden deep in the hills outside Ridgeview. It wasn't listed on Google Maps, just a faded driveway that disappeared behind a wall of evergreens. I didn't call. I didn't ask for permission. I just drove. The place looked like it had been forgotten by time, pale bricks stained with rain, narrow windows that seemed too small for light. I parked near the side entrance and walked in, heart pounding, palms damp. A woman sat behind thick, bulletproof glass at the reception desk. She looked at me like she'd stopped believing in anything new a long time ago. "I'm here to visit Lana Wells," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm her daughter." She didn't say anything at first, just stared, then picked up the phone and whispered something I couldn't hear. A few seconds later, the lock on the door buzzed. "Second hallway, last room on the left, keep it short." I nodded and stepped inside. The hallway smelled like bleach and something older, like memories sealed in concrete. As I walked, I passed a bulletin board covered in faded pastel flyers about emotional wellness and creative therapy. None of it looked like it had changed in decades. And then I saw her. She was sitting near the window, a threadbare blue sweater hanging off her frame. Her hands were folded in her lap like she didn't trust them to move. Her hair was thin and shot through with gray, but her spine held this strange kind of grace, like she used to be someone who stood tall. "Lana?" I said softly. She turned slowly, not startled, just aware. Her eyes met mine and something flickered, just for a second. Not recognition, but something close. She stared at me for a moment, then whispered, "I remember." I sat down in the chair across from her, unsure if I was allowed to touch her hand. I didn't want to scare her. "They watched me," she said suddenly, her voice stronger than I expected. "They told me I was imagining things, that I was paranoid, but I remember every name, every file, every test." She wasn't talking to me. Not really. It was like she was talking to the wall, to herself, to whatever past kept spinning behind her eyes. I worked at Silver Birch, she continued. I was a psychiatrist. I worked under Dr. Halverson. I started noticing patterns, experimental, drugs, isolation therapy, memory disruptions, all used on women labeled unstable or inconvenient. I didn't blink. I didn't breathe. They silenced me, she said. I filed a report. 1 week later, I was in here. She finally turned to look at me again. They said I was unfit to raise a child. They never let me hold you. Just a signature. And you were gone. My throat closed. A nurse walked past the doorway and Lana went quiet, her whole posture shifting like muscle memory. The nurse glanced in, didn't stop, just kept moving. When she was gone, Lana exhaled. They told me he couldn't adopt you, she said. That it wasn't possible. But Charles, he had connections. He sealed the records, took you anyway. My hands were numb. I couldn't feel the chair beneath me. You were evidence, she said. You were proof. He used you like a weapon. I was too loud, so they made me disappear, and gave my daughter to the man I tried to expose. She looked straight at me. They told me I wasn't fit to hold you, she whispered, but I never stopped remembering your face. I left Ridgeview with Lana's voice echoing in my head, repeating over and over like a heartbeat I couldn't. Calm. She remembered me. Even after everything they did to her, she still remembered my face. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I just drove. Windows down, music off, trying to let the wind carry away the weight that had settled on my chest. But it didn't. Back at my apartment, I emptied my bag onto the kitchen counter. Notes, copies, a folded birth certificate, that court file with the missing signature. I stared at the pile like it might rearrange itself into an answer. I knew this wasn't just about me anymore. It hadn't been for a long time. I opened my laptop and started digging again. The Halverson Institute kept coming up over and over like a bad refrain. There were mentions in nonprofit registries, board announcements, archived press releases no one had read in years. The name that stopped me cold was one I already knew too well. Thomas Brenner, my adoptive father, listed as a founding board member of the Halverson Institute. It was right there, quiet, public, hiding in plain sight. I felt something shift in my stomach. Not fear exactly, but recognition. He hadn't just known about the system that took me, he helped build it. I didn't stop. I couldn't. I went back to the attic the next morning and combed through everything again. This time, I opened the drawers of the old wooden desk they'd once moved from my childhood room. First one was empty. The second held a few broken pencils, a tangled bracelet. But in the third, the lining didn't sit right. I peeled it back and found an envelope taped beneath the bottom panel. It was yellowed, brittle, labeled in thin pen. Confidential. E. Graves. Inside, a second set of documents, my name again, Marlon Wells, and across one page, stamped in red, the words, placement approved under internal reassignment protocol. Not adoption, reassignment, like a test result, like a case number, like property. I sat down on the hardwood floor and stared at the paper, my hands shaking, my chest hollowed out. They didn't save me, they processed me, like I was some leftover asset in a system built to disappear people like Lana. That was the moment the shame stopped. That was the moment I stopped apologizing. Even to myself, I grabbed a fresh notebook and started writing. I wrote down everything. Names, dates, timelines, the institutions, the overlapping names between Halverson and Silver Birch. I mapped out the connections. I documented the signatures. Every document, every scan, every photo. I filled page after page until my fingers cramped and the pen ran dry. Then I opened a blank Word document and typed 6 words. What happens when a child is reassigned? That was the headline. It became the first entry in my blog. I wasn't subtle. I didn't try to soften the language. I called it what it was. A system. A machine. A network of institutions that hid behind words like care and protection, but operated in silence and paperwork. I included screenshots, redacted for now. I told my story exactly how it happened, without trimming the ugly parts, because the ugly parts were the truth. When I was done, I saved it as a draft. But even sitting unpublished, it felt like it was already alive. Then I reached out to someone I'd followed for years, Rachel Ash. She was an investigative journalist, the kind who never let stories drop just because people got uncomfortable. She'd written exposés that brought down entire medical boards. If anyone would listen, it was her. I didn't send my name, just 2 files, encrypted. One labeled Wells Custody Transfer, the other, Internal Protocol Memo, Halverson Institute. I added a single line in the message. I have proof. I want to talk. I stared at the screen for a long time before hitting send. My finger hovered, almost like part of me was still asking for permission. Then I clicked, and it was gone. The moment the email disappeared, I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. The air around me didn't feel lighter, but I did, just a little. Later that night, I sat on the couch with the lights off and thought about all the times Vera had called me a gift. All the times they told people I was the lucky one. How many times I'd heard it. They saved you. But none of it had been about love. They labeled me a gift, but I was a transaction. The blog post went live at noon. By 1:30, it had already been reshared over 100 times. A quiet hum turned into a buzz. Comments started to trickle in, some confused, some furious, a few from people who'd clearly been waiting for someone to say what I just had. But I knew it wouldn't take long before the pushback came. It started with Vienna. She posted a story on Instagram that night. A filtered selfie, soft lighting, that same tilted chin she always used when she wanted to look grateful. The caption read, "Protect your peace, even from fake family." She didn't tag me. She didn't have to. The implication was loud enough to ring across the entire internet. By morning, 2 old college friends had messaged me. Casual, kind, too rehearsed. One wrote, "Hey, I heard you're going through something. Just want you to know we're here." Another added, "No shame in talking to someone. Therapy helps, especially when things feel big." They didn't say it, but I could feel it in every word. They thought I was unraveling, and maybe they didn't mean it to be cruel. But it still stung. The soft kind of gaslighting, wrapped in concern. That careful way people step back and pretend it's support. I didn't respond. I didn't have to. Instead, I went back to the house. Vera wasn't home. Charles was out of town for some nonprofit event in Charleston, one of those weekend galas where he could wear a tux and pretend his reputation hadn't started to crack. The house was quiet when I let myself in. The air smelled the same, citrus cleaner and money. The walls were lined with the usual photos, Vienna in her cap and gown, Vienna on a mountain, Vienna holding a microphone. I wasn't in a single frame anymore. At some point, someone had just edited me out. I went straight to Charles's study. It was always locked, but I knew where he kept the key. Taped underneath the second drawer of his filing cabinet, hidden, behind a card that said "World's Best Dad" in Vienna's handwriting. The desk clicked open easily. Too easily. Inside was an envelope. Thick, labeled, confidential, Halverson file. My hands shook as I pulled it free and opened it. The first page was a psychological assessment. Lana's name at the top, labeled with red ink, persistent delusions, paranoia recommended for immediate institutionalization. But that wasn't what stopped me. It was the next page, a custody transfer form. My name printed neatly, Mara Lynn Wells, reassigned, not adopted, not fostered, reassigned through internal protocol under board authorization, signed at the bottom, in his handwriting, Thomas Charles Brenner. He hadn't just approved it. He had made it happen. He'd taken me from Lana after she'd been locked away for trying to tell the truth. I wasn't some lost child they rescued. I was a paper trail he collected. I was evidence he needed to control. I left the house without taking anything else. Just that file. And the next morning, I met Nurse Mara in the alley behind Ridgeview. During her smoke break, just like she'd promised. She didn't say much. just handed me a small flash drive and muttered, "She wasn't the only one. Claire, the woman who came before me, the journalist, she'd asked too many questions. She'd vanished weeks after visiting the facility. But before she disappeared, she left this: notes, timelines, interviews, records. And on one file, she'd written a single line. Mara was the key. She was too young to remember, but she was part of it. Everything started to fit." That night, as I sat in my apartment uploading every file to a secure cloud, my phone rang. No name. Just a number I didn't recognize. I answered. "Mara," he said, calm, steady, like he was delivering a sermon. "Charles. You don't know what you're getting into," he said. "You think you're building something, but all you're doing is reopening wounds no one asked you to touch." I didn't speak. Just let him talk. "You're making this difficult for everyone. For your mother, for your sister. We gave you everything. A life. Stability. You were raised well." He paused. "You don't want to do this." Claire didn't. And look what happened to her. There it was. A warning dressed like concern. A threat that pretended to be care. I smiled, just barely. "Thanks for the call, Dad," I said. "This pairs nicely with the files I've compiled." Then I hung up, and just like that, I stopped being afraid of him. The story broke just after sunrise. By noon it was everywhere, on news sites, social threads, local radio. Headlines called it a scandal, a whistleblower expose, but to me, it just felt like air finally being cleared. The truth was out. The files I sent to Rachel had done their job. She didn't flinch. Within days, state investigators opened a formal inquiry into the Halverson Institute. Subpoenas went out. Ridgeview was put on watch. And my father's name, Thomas Brenner, was officially tied to the board that had funneled women into silence and children into reassignment. I watched it all unfold quietly. No press, no interviews, just me on the couch with a cup of tea and my laptop open, watching their perfect picture unravel. And then came the part that mattered more than any headline: Lana. Rachel helped fast-track the legal process. It took weeks of paperwork, 2 court appearances, and more tension than I could explain. But eventually we got it. Her release. Walking through those same sterile halls again felt different this time. I wasn't alone. I had a folder in my hand, and someone standing beside me who believed me. That changed everything. Lana was sitting by the window when we found her. Same blue sweater, but this time her posture looked different, like something had shifted in her too, even if she didn't know why. "We're taking you home," I told. "Her." She blinked once, slowly. Then she smiled. Not wide, not dramatic, just soft, like something deep in her finally exhaled. After we left Ridgeview, I didn't announce anything. No celebration, no big post. I just helped her settle into a small care home on the edge of town. It wasn't fancy, but it was warm, peaceful. The kind of place where wind chimes rattled softly on the porch and the nurses actually used your name. She gets visitors now. Every Thursday, I bring her herbal tea and fresh fruit. Some days, she remembers everything. Other days, she just stares at the garden. But each time I say, "Hi, Lana," her face lights up like sunlight catching glass. And that's enough. Back in my own life, things started to rebuild, slowly. I moved into a new apartment, small but mine. I painted the walls the exact color I wanted. I picked out every plate, every towel, every frame. No more hand-me-down furniture, no more shadows hanging over the rooms. I also started a new job, designing transitional housing for women leaving abusive relationships. It wasn't glamorous, but it was good, solid. And every time I handed someone keys to a space they could finally call theirs, I felt like a piece of me was settling too. The day I changed my name, it was quiet. Just a courthouse hallway, some signatures, and a woman at the counter who didn't even look up when I slid the paper over, from Mara Bellamy to Mara Wells. It felt steady, like closing a chapter without slamming it shut. I didn't send a family group text. I didn't post about it. I didn't owe them that. They had given me a name that never really fit. I was done carrying it like it was mine to fix. The public response came fast. People started sharing their own stories. Messages from women who'd been in places like Ridgeview or who'd had siblings erased by family secrets. One woman wrote, "My cousin disappeared into Halverson. She never came back. Thank you for speaking." And then there were the strangers. Hundreds of them. Just saying, "I see you. I believe you. I've been there." I kept every message. Every single one. I didn't reply to all of them, but I read them, and I let them remind me that I wasn't shouting into a void anymore. Vienna never reached out. She deleted her stories, cleared her profile. No apology, no explanation, just disappeared from the curated life she'd built. Vera lost her board seat. Charles was summoned for questioning. The walls were cracking, but I didn't wait around to see what collapsed. That part wasn't mine to carry anymore. Instead, I framed a copy of my real birth certificate, the one with Lana's name on it. It sits next to a paper flower she made during one of our early visits, pressed between glass. Some nights, I still sit in the quiet and think about all the years I spent trying to be who they wanted, trying to earn a place in a story that was never mine to begin with. But now, I don't feel erased. They tried to write me out, but I wrote myself back in. These days, when I visit Lana, we don't talk much about the past. Sometimes we don't talk at all. I just sit beside her in that quiet little room filled with soft music and blooming plants by the windowsill. I bring her tea from her favorite place down the street. Jasmine, no sugar. She always smiles when she takes the first sip, like it still surprises her that something gentle can belong to her. Sometimes she remembers my name right away. Other times she stares at me for a second too long before it lands. But every time she says it, Mara, it sounds like a thread stitching us back together, one loop at a time. She tells me about her dreams now, not the ones from sleep, but the ones she used to have when she was younger. Gardens, sunlight, a child running through tall grass. She never says it, but I think I was that child. Or maybe I was supposed to be. We don't talk about Ridgeview or Silver Birch or the way everything was taken from her. That part's already been said. Instead, we sit in the quiet and let the presence be enough. And most days, it is. There wasn't some big parade moment when the truth came out. No dramatic courtroom collapse, no public apology, no one falling to their knees asking for forgiveness. And honestly, I didn't need that. I didn't want to be rescued. I just wanted the truth, and now I have it. I wake up in a space that's mine, surrounded by things I chose. I work with women who are learning how to rebuild, brick by careful brick. And every day I get to remind them, and myself, that survival isn't the whole story. Healing is. And healing doesn't need to be loud to be real. I changed my name not to run away from the past, but to walk fully into who I've always been. Sometimes I think about that day in the backyard, when my parents stood under the tool-covered gazebo and announced my existence like it was a community service. I remember the way everyone clapped politely, not really knowing what they were applauding. And I think, this is what they'll remember. Not the truth, not the fight, just the version that looked best in photos. But I remember. And I've learned that sometimes family isn't where we begin. It's what we choose to build once we know the truth. If you've ever had to walk away from a version of family to protect the person you're becoming, I hope you know you're not alone. I'd love to hear your story in the comments if you feel ready to share. And if Mara's journey stayed with you, even just a little, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We've got more stories coming. Ones that cut deep but also remind us how strong we really are. Thanks for listening.